Vardanyan for the beautiful music as we came into the facility on this very special occasion. And I welcome all of you to Glendale Community College's commemoration of the centennial of the Armenian Genocide. Glendale Community College's vision is to be the greater Los Angeles region's premier learning community where all students achieve their informed educational goals. And as we work together to reach that vision, we focus on assuring students' overall experience at this college, at Glendale Community College, result in 7 key learning outcomes. Outcomes that describe the knowledge, abilities, skills, and attitudes students will have when they complete their experience at our GCC. One of those institutional learning outcomes is that upon leaving the college, students will recognize the interconnectedness of global, national, and local concerns, be able to analyze cultural, political, social, and environmental issues from multiple perspectives, and be able to understand the interdependence of the global environment and humanity. And another of those 7 outcomes is to have the ability to critically think, to evaluate the credibility and significance of information. Our month-long commemoration of the centennial of the Armenian Genocide is an essential part of our education endeavor here at Glendale Community College and as we serve as a community leader. The resolution of our governing board of the Glendale Community College District, which designated the month of April as the time of commemoration, urged our students, faculty, staff, and bringing in the community to engage together in significant learning opportunities about the Armenian Genocide, other genocides, and significant issues of human rights, locally, nationally, and across the globe. Opportunities to critically think, opportunities to understand our interdependence and connectedness, and to commit all of us to being ever vigilant and outspoken in doing all we can to never forget and to never let such evil be perpetrated on our fellow humankind. As we continue with our remembering and learning, it's my honor to introduce several special guests joining us this afternoon, and I'm going to ask them as I read their names to stand and remain standing, and then for you to hold your applause and recognize them when all have been introduced. Let me start with our own governing board of Glendale Community College, present today, Dr. Viar Perumian, Anita, hold your applause, great as he is, Anita Quinones Gabrielian, Dr. Armine Hacopian, and Ann Ransford. Representing elected officials, Representative Congressman Adam Schiff's office, Mary Hovagimian. Representing Senator Carol Liu's office, Talin Mangioglu. Representing Mike Gatto's office, Mary Manukian. From our great city of Glendale, Mayor Zare Zananyan, Council Member Ara Najarian, soon-to-be Council Member Vartan Garpetian, City Clerk Artie Kasakian, and Interim Fire Chief Greg Fish. And we are also pleased to have our sister city, so to speak, of Burbank, Council Member Jess Talamantes and Ms. Emily Gable-Luddy. And we are joined in great partnership with the Unified School District, Glendale Unified School District, Sandy Russell, Greg Krikorian, Armina Carpetian, Nairi Nahabidian. And also representing the Armenian National Committee of America, Glendale Chapter, Arten Manukian. And from the Healthcare Foundation of Glendale Adventist Medical Center, its president, Irene Borden and Michael Peranian. And also with us, the foundation president of the Glendale Community College Foundation, Pat Crouch. Thank you all very much for being with us and such a significant part of our great community. And now the president of the Associated Students of Glendale Community College, Francisco Aguilar.
Hello, everybody. Again, my name is Francisco Aguilar. And before coming to school at Glendale Community College, I had never really connected with Armenians. Since my time here at Yerevan Jr., as most of my Armenian friends like to call Glendale Community College, I made a connection with the Armenian community. They tell me vivid stories about their homeland and how great their grandmother's cooking is, and how I must attend an Armenian wedding to fully understand it. Though it was an amazing experience to understand a new culture, it was also a very sobering one when I found out about the Armenian genocide. It seemed that the fact about the Armenian genocide were hidden from society until my friends at GCC opened my eyes to the truth behind the massacres of 1915. Thankfully, the faculty and staff at GCC are very vocal about educating as many people as possible about these atrocities and hold multiple seminars and events every day on April to ensure that the Armenian genocide is remembered each year. The term knowledge is power has never resonated as strongly. Although I cannot begin to understand the pain and anger which Armenians feel about the genocide, I know that I can do my part. And I know that as long as Glendale Community College can do theirs, to continue to spread the word and honor the victims of the genocide. Thank you so much for your time.
Hello, I'm Congressman Adam Schiff, and I have the privilege of representing a large and vibrant Armenian American community in California's 28th Congressional District. On April 24th, we will commemorate the 100th anniversary of the Armenian Genocide. 100 years ago, the Ottoman Empire, in its dying throes, undertook a systematic effort to exterminate the Armenian people, killing over 1.5 million Armenian men, women, and children in a campaign of death and destruction. 100 years later, we will stand up again to say that their efforts failed. The evidence is all around us, with a thriving Armenian diaspora that I'm honored to represent, and a proud Armenian nation and heritage their descendants have continued to pass on. We stand together because in the face of the continued denial of the historic facts of the genocide by Turkey, we have a duty and an obligation to speak the truth. That's why I was proud to join with 50 of my colleagues last month to introduce the Armenian Genocide Truth and Justice Resolution, which would recognize the genocide and call on the administration to work towards reconciliation between Turkey and Armenia based on an acceptance of the historic facts. As we approach April 24th, I'm also working with my colleagues to call on the President to recognize the genocide. Our government must not continue to maintain this shameful silence about the killings, especially since American diplomats and journalists were so instrumental in alerting the outside world about what was happening to the Armenian people at the time. Our message after 100 years is simple. We will never forget. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman Adam Schiff. Honorable guests, our city elected officials, school district, and my trustees from Glendale College who passed a resolution to recognize this day as a day of remembering. On the other hand, this day, because it's the 100th anniversary, we want to say thank you, America. Thank you, America, for allowing people who weren't born in the United States to allow them to get elected. For someone like me, that is a major, major honor. I'm going to give you a story of my background so that you know how families are impacted continuously as a result of the genocide. And yes, it was a genocide. We all know it, the facts stated. Even the Pope called it a genocide. During this genocide, my father, who lived in Van, which was part of Turkish territory, and his brother were playing, ages 5 and 7. All of a sudden, they hear a lot of commotion, and their mother, understanding what was going on, orders the two boys to go hide at the side of the stream that they had running through their yard. So these two boys, each hiding on the opposing side, are listening to screaming, shouting, and then all noise stops. After a few days of being dazed and being hungry and thirsty, my father gets out of his hiding place and walks to his home. And this is him talking. I walked to my house. I wanted my mother's cooking. I walked there, but I didn't dare walk in because there was something bad that had happened there. It smelled terrible. I didn't think that was the cooking of my mother. And he just sat at the door, never going in, thinking that his brother had been killed as well. At that time, a horseman comes and picks him up and takes him. Luckily, there were other children on that horse, so he kind of felt that this may be a safe place. My father is taken directly to an orphanage, being a self-initiator, loving education, becomes an accomplished photographer. Moving the years forward 50, 60 years, we are now in Iran. My dad has accomplished many things. One of them was being the king's photographer. So everyone who was a VIP would come to my dad and say, either greetings or goodbye, I'm going, and so forth. His friend walks into to my dad's studio. I was in the other room, and he asks my dad, "Why don't you come to Armenia with me? I'm going there." My father said, "I have no one there. I have nothing to do with Armenia anymore." So his friend leaves. Walking in the streets of Armenia 2 weeks later, his friend runs to my dad and says, "Hey, Sarkis, you didn't tell me you were going to come to America. I told you I was going to be here." This gentleman turned around and said, "I am not Sarkis, but I had a brother by that name who died in the genocide." At that time, they both sit at the pavement and they both cry because his friend tells him, "Your brother is alive, doing very well, has a family, and you need to get in touch with him." Of course, when his friend comes back, and all of a sudden I hear screaming from my dad's studio, I go in, and it's my dad crying his heart out because his brother was alive. But you see, he had emotionally left that area of his thoughts because it was too painful to remember. My dad never went to Armenia, to see his brother, but I sure did. And it was one of the most fantastic experiences of my life. But I can tell you that I want you to multiply my dad's story 1.5 million times. Every family has a similar story. Every family has lost someone. So that's why the wounds are open. So I hope in your own life you make sure to close wounds rather than open them. And I'm sure you will, because this is a community that is very aware of bad things that happen to people. Well, something good that happened to Glendale College was when Dr. Vahe Perumian was appointed first and then selected by the people to be a member of the trustee. We are very proud of him because he's a very accomplished individual, and if he'll permit me, I would like to read a little bit about what he has been able to accomplish. And really, only in America people can accomplish such heights, and we thank you, America, for this. Dr. Perumian is a professor of physics and astronomy at USC. He received his PhD in physics from UCLA in 1994 and has carried out very important research in space science for the last 20 years. From 1999 to 2014, he was a researcher, scientist, and professor of physics and astronomy at UCLA. He authored and co-authored over 60 papers and peer-reviewed journals. Has done many presentations and has received the Outstanding Teaching Award at UCLA for about 8 academic years. I think that's an excellent accomplishment. USC, hearing about Dr. Perumian, came after him and hired him to become a professor at USC, which is a new happening, and we congratulate you, Dr. Perumian, who is also has tremendous knowledge of architecture, an avid photographer, outstanding photographer, and also a pilot. I mean, he's a very well-rounded person, and I take credit for that because I forced him to come and be a part of Glendale College. He is also member of the board of directors of Glendale Youth Alliance. He's been a trustee since 2005, and he is also author of textbooks. And I just want you to know, Dr. Perumian, that on behalf of the board, we are very proud of your accomplishments. So I think we need to give him a round of applause. I also would like the committee members to stand up. Mr. Sarkis Gazarian, where are you, Sarkis? Hold your applause. Mr. Sarkis Gazarian, Teni Bazikian, myself, Liza Hakobyan, Lara Kartalian, Ani Keshishian, Oshin Keshishian, Dr. Levon Marashlian, Toler Ukayan, Isabel Saber, and Sally Holmes. They've done an outstanding job in creating a week with almost 10 events. So I am going to move away and tell you thank you for coming here, and remember, prevent genocides.
I apologize for my voice. It's actually worse than Dr. Hacopian's, but I'll try to get this out. I did have to lecture 3 hours at USC this morning, so that didn't help. Never before in the history of the world had such a mass of human beings moved and suffered together. When I first heard these words, never before in the history of the world had such a mass of human beings moved and suffered together. Like many of you, my thoughts were immediately of the Armenian genocide, surely the first mass deportation and destruction of human beings in history. But no, these words predated the genocide by 17 years. It was 1898, years before the Great War consumed Europe, and the human experience, even after the Hamidian massacres of Armenians and other minorities from 1894 to 1896, did not include suffering on such a grand scale. The words I spoke were actually written by H.G. Wells, and the perpetrators of this suffering were not human, but the Martian invaders of planet Earth in his famous novel, War of the Worlds. In 1898, we could not imagine the wholesale deportation and massacre of an entire nation. We could not imagine that humans could do this to other humans, at least not on such an organized and enormous scale. Soon, though, this would change, and the 20th century would be filled by example after example of man's inhumanity to man during war, with the pretext of war or otherwise. During and immediately after the Great Catastrophe, the Metz-Yerernaz President Obama, as he once again shied away from using the G word, will call it in his message tomorrow, mankind was at a loss for words. Poets, novelists, and even the crafty-tongued journalists of the time were stymied. What do you call concerted actions designed to annihilate an entire nation? The headlines read, "Appeal to Turkey to stop massacres." 500,000 Armenians said to have perished. 800,000 Armenians counted destroyed. Yet, none of these headlines, and not even the unimaginably large numbers of deaths, could adequately describe what went on during the fateful years of 1915 to 1923. In 1998, the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court came up with a definition of particularly odious offenses in that they constitute a serious attack on human dignity or grave humiliation or a degradation of human beings. They went on to clarify, these aren't isolated or sporadic events, but are part either of a government policy of a wide practice of atrocities tolerated or condoned by a government or a de facto authority. Murder, massacres, dehumanization, extermination, human experimentation, extrajudicial punishments, death squads, military use of children, kidnapping, unjust imprisonment, slavery, cannibalism, torture, rape, political, racial, or religious persecution, and other inhumane acts reach the threshold of crimes against humanity only if they are part of a widespread or systematic practice. Crimes against humanity. These are in fact the very words used for the first time in the history of mankind by the Allied powers, Britain, France, and Russia, when they issued a joint statement on May 24, 1915, a month after the genocide began. In that statement, they charged the government of Turkey of committing a crime against humanity. The statement read, in part, "In view of these new crimes of Turkey against humanity and civilization, the Allied governments announced publicly to the Sublime Porte that they will hold personally responsible for these crimes all members of the Ottoman government, as well as those of their agents who are implicated in such massacres." Years later, after the Second World War and another great catastrophe, Raphael Lemkin, who lost 49 members of his family to the Jewish Holocaust, would coin the word genocide. Genocide and Holocaust. Two words deliberately designed to convey the severity of that heinous crime against humanity. The word Holocaust, whose literal and biblical meaning is to be burnt in whole, or at least its Armenian version, Vohchakizum, was no stranger to Armenian survivors of the genocide. Vohchakizum referred to the actual incidents of victims thrown into huge pits and set on fire, or the acts of locking the entire population of a village into a church and setting it ablaze. It would be years, even decades though, before the Armenian nation came to grips with what happened, before these words or their predecessors were used to address the memory of those apocalyptic years. Dr. Gregory Stanton, the president of Genocide Watch, the International Alliance to End Genocide, has developed what are now the 10 stages of the genocide. These are classification, the act of distinguishing people into us and them by ethnicity, race, religion, nationality. Symbolization, the names that are given to the classification. In the case of the Armenians, gavurs or infidels or vermin. Discrimination, dehumanization, organization, polarization, extremists driving the groups apart, hate groups broadcasting polarizing propaganda, laws forbidding intermarriage, marriage or social interaction. Preparation of the final solution, words used by more than one state as it prepared for genocide. Persecution, extermination, and finally, denial. There are many, among them Elie Wiesel, who have correctly pointed out that the continued denial of the genocide by the Republic of Turkey actually means that the Armenian genocide never ended, that the genocide continues today. Jeffrey Robertson stated in the now famous Perinček versus Switzerland case that genocide denial can have a double impact. It makes survivors of genocide, their children and grandchildren, feel the worthlessness and contempt and inferiority the initial perpetrators intended, and it incites admiration for those perpetrators and a dangerous desire to emulate them. During the last month, the slow, deliberate, but ever-growing snowball of recognition of the genocide by world bodies and leaders has gained more and more momentum. 23 countries and 43 of the United States officially recognized the events of 1915 to 1923 as genocide. Just last week, the European Parliament, reaffirming its recognition of the genocide, called on the government of Turkey to recognize the genocide and pave the way for a genuine reconciliation. Ask any Armenian, though, and they'll tell you that before reconciliation, there is reparation and there is restitution. Victims of every genocide in the 20th century would agree with this. Recognition of the genocide by the government of Turkey would finally end the genocide, but the healing process would not and could not begin without reparations. The year of my birth, 1965, coincided with the first public commemoration of the genocide in what was then Soviet Armenia. That year, 100,000 Armenians poured into the streets of Yerevan and slowly but deliberately marched to the Opera House, where they held a 24-hour vigil. Their march was echoed in the diaspora, where peaceful demonstrations replaced the wakes and mournful commemorations, where the Armenian youth were politicized and Armenian political demands were formulated, beginning the half-century-long cry for recognition that brings us here today. Each of the 100,000 Armenians gathering in the opera in 1965, each and every Armenian living in Armenia and abroad, whether personally touched by the genocide or not, shares the pain of the great catastrophe. Recovering from wounds of the Armenian genocide is part of the psyche of every Armenian family and every Armenian alive today. Many of us refer to ourselves in relation to the cities in Western Armenia, today's Eastern Turkey, that we originate from. I'm a Vanetsi, and my paternal grandfather was born in Van and endured and survived not one, but two genocidal attempts by the Turks, once in 1915 and a second time in 1917 when the Russian army retreated after the Bolshevik Revolution. Each one of us has a similar story. Each one of us can trace the road their ancestors took, where their families were lost, and where the road eventually took the remnants of our nation. Dr. Rubina Perumian writes, I know a map with red dots, large and small, showing the places where pain and suffering, massacres occurred. But these dots do not speak the language of pain and suffering that I read in the literature of atrocity. They do not represent all of the places, the towns and villages where the deportees passed by, leaving their dead behind. The red dots on the map of my mind are moving. They begin to walk the death march and cover the entire country. Turkey is painted in red, the color of Armenian blood. That is what the genocide is, and that is what the genocide has done to Turkey. During the last 100 years, the red dots have moved even more and now cover the entire globe. Each one of us is a remnant of a red dot. Each one of us originated at a red dot on the map of Anatolia. The world is now covered with the blood of Armenians. This is what the genocide has done to the world. The 20th century began with the Allied powers condemning Turkey of crimes against humanity. Turkey's denial today, though, is bolstered by the complicity of these very same powers in conflicts with similarly dire outcomes. During the Rwandan genocide of 1994, the world was a bystander, watching as nearly 1 million ethnic Tutsis were killed. Shortly after, though, it became apparent that the French government had played a significant role in arming the Hutu majority in the years leading to the genocide. Proxy war after proxy war has been fought during the last 100 years, with political and economic interests trumping the basic tenets of humanity. The list of genocides we recite from seems to grow from April to April each year, and Pope Francis, in his comments last week, said that humanity seems incapable of putting a halt to the shedding of innocent blood. Mankind is now firmly in the grips of the 21st century, and we would like to see ourselves as a much more civilized version of our 20th century counterparts who invented genocide and practiced it often. We'd like to see ourselves as more vigilant than they, more attuned to the acts of man's inhumanity to man. Revolutions are now broadcast live, and inhumane acts and acts of hatred, even when they don't approach the magnitude of their 20th century counterparts, are immediately condemned. When Hrant Dink was murdered in January 2007, the world shouted, "I am Hrant Dink." When the staff of the satirical French magazine Charlie Hebdo were murdered, the world shouted, "Je suis Charlie." It is time for humanity to take the next step. It's time for the cries of never again uttered by survivors of genocide after genocide to be echoed worldwide. It is time for mankind to finally put a halt to the shedding of innocent blood. It is time for the recognition of genocides and the recognition of the Armenian genocide by the Republic of Turkey and by the United States to be a moral responsibility and not the victim of the political expediency. It is time for the human race to finally grow up, and it is time for mankind to collectively say, we are human and enough is enough. Thank you.
I'm very honored today to be presenting on behalf of the committee that I'm a part of. America, we thank you, a tribute to Near East Relief, which is an initiative of the ANCA Western Region. Today, I'll be sharing with you the history of the world's first large-scale humanitarian effort spearheaded by the United States executive and legislative branches in response to the Armenian Genocide. On January 13, 1915, the New York Times reports Talat Pasha's declaration to the fact that there is just no room for Armenians in Turkey. Immediately thereafter, Ambassador Morgenthau, U.S. ambassador to Turkey at the time, is alarmed by the arrest and imprisonment of over 200 Armenian intellectuals and professionals who were later executed. On April 29, and in the April 29 issue of the New York Times, U.S. Ambassador Morgenthau's statement is published, stating the reports of great uneasiness over the treatment of Armenians. Here is the original telegraph that you see, written by Ambassador Morgenthau on September 3 to the Secretary of State, reporting, and I quote, "Destruction of the Armenian race in Turkey is progressing rapidly. Massacre has been reported in Ankara and Bursa. He also asks a committee to be formed to raise funds and provide means to save some of the Armenians and help them migrate to the U.S. via the Panama Canal." So here you see the words, the destruction of the Armenian race. I would consider that the first U.S. admission that that is a genocide, because as you know, that is the precise definition of a genocide. In 1915, 2 weeks after receiving Ambassador Morgenthau's telegram, the U.S. Department of State, with the leadership of a group of U.S. philanthropists, founded the American Committee for Armenian and Syrian Relief. In 1919, the name of the American Committee was incorporated to Near East Relief. The Near East Relief was faced with the challenge of rescuing at that time thousands of children who were displaced, starving, diseased, to find shelter. Missionaries collected thousands of children lost in the streets and the parents of whom had disappeared, either executed or deported. During the period of 1915 to 1930, a unfortunately unpublicized part of U.S. history, 3 U.S. presidents, Wilson, Harding, and Coolidge, appealed to the American people to come to the aid of the Armenian people and asked them to make generous contributions. The Near East Relief launched a robust campaign to raise $30 million on behalf of the Armenian, Greek, Jewish, and Syrian people, but mostly, over 70%, the Armenian people who were being executed at the hands of the Turkish government. They used a multimedia approach to reach out to the American people as well as to the world. This included presidential appeals, posters, billboards, celebrities, movies, and advertisements. The main poster of the campaign was derived from an actual image of a desperate Armenian woman carrying her children. And that is the actual image that the poster was based on. Posters called on the American people to come to the aid of Armenian girls and boys. Here's a poster that symbolizes the Statue of Liberty. Instead of a torch, she carries a sword and is requesting the aid of the American people to come to the rescue of 4 million Armenian women and children. Stamps and buttons were used to raise funds. Here's an image symbolizing the Near East relief workers who rescued Armenian children under the protection of the Armenian flag. Here's a poster of Uncle Sam protecting Armenian orphans on the plains of Ararat with ruined churches in the background. These, I remind you, were all posters that were disseminated here in the United States by the United States government during this period of 1915 to 1930. The entertainment industry mobilized to assist NER efforts. Celebrities, including Charlie Chaplin and Jackie Coogan, joined the efforts. Jackie Coogan launched the campaign Ask Milk for Starving Children, Jackie's Near East Relief Milk Train. President Coolidge announced December 2, 1923 to be the International Golden Rule Sunday. This meant that observing Americans would eat like orphans on that Sunday, donating the difference between their traditional American meal and their orphan meal to the Near East Relief for the benefit of the starving Armenian children. Hollywood stars also observed and publicized their observance of this Golden Rule Sunday. During this period, the Near East Relief delivered food, clothing, and materials for shelter from the United States of America by the shipload. Between 1915 and 1930, this aid totaled $117 million, equivalent to $2.8 billion in today's dollars. This surpassed by a lot the original goal of $30 million. Between 1919 and 1920 alone, an average of 333,000 people were fed daily. Between 130,000 Armenian children scattered and placed in several orphanages across the region were housed, fed, and provided with medical care. Here is a photo of the largest orphanage in the world in Armenia, 30,000 orphans, and you see the Armenian flag is circled in the middle. The orphans were provided more than just housing and food. They were also provided with vocational skills and helped to become self-sufficient. This included vocational skills in the areas of knitting, sewing, shoemaking, binding, metalwork and forging, farming, and embroidery. Here, inside this factory, is where girls learned to weave rugs. In 1925, a very special rug was created and sent to the US President Coolidge. As a token of gratitude and appreciation for all the sacrifices made by the US government, the US President received this beautiful special rug woven by orphan girls in the Ghazir orphanage. And as you all are familiar, I'm sure, this is the very rug that was displayed in the White House in 2014. Here in 1986 is Viar Hakobyan, one of the orphans who actually worked on this rug. I'd like to wrap my presentation up by stating that this period of US history is responsible for the salvation of hundreds of thousands of Armenian victims of genocide. With insight now into this paramount period of history, I call upon you to take this history and thank the US government for the collective generosity and humanitarianism displayed during this period. This is an effort that was responsible for the salvation of hundreds of thousands of orphans, including 3 of my great-grandparents who were rescued by Near East Relief orphanages in Syria and Lebanon. But it doesn't end there. This is a period of not only Armenian history, but of United States history. This is a period of history that needs to be disseminated in US history books. And I urge you to be a group that disseminates this information. So this is a call to action. Thank you.
I Instead of speaking about the GCC, Armenian Student Association Genocide plaque, I'm going to show you something that I put together from 1991.
First off, I'd like to welcome everybody for being here. I thank you all. I would also like to thank the council members, Larry Zaryan and Eileen Gibbons, for sharing their point of views with us. I would like to also thank Dean Smith and President and Superintendent Dr. Devitt for giving us this opportunity to go on with the ceremonies today. And of course, Professor Marashlian for being our advisor, and we could not have done this without his advice. And right now, I would like to invite council members Larry Zaryan and Eileen Gibbons to say a few words.
And I'm pleased to be here today. I am delighted to know that you're planting these trees, and better yet, to know that it's going to be an annual event to commemorate the genocide. I think that it's important that you take this leadership role in teaching all of us about our history, our cultures, our heritages, and so that we can better work together today.
I too want to thank Shai and the leadership of the student body here for inviting us to come to this very wonderful occasion. Being someone that has had relatives that have gone through the genocide, I understand what you're doing. But then again, what you are doing today is not necessarily only for the Armenian community. It is a monument. Trees are there and monuments are there as a reminder to humanity that regardless of who it is, when a nation, when a group of people feel that they're superior to someone else and they can create genocides anywhere in this world, whether it's against Armenians, Jews, Kurds, and if we don't have reminders like this, if young people like you are not forever reminding the media and the world that genocide is wrong against anyone, often people mistake and they say this is April 24th and it deals with the 1915 genocide of the Armenians. If you were to take the name Armenian out, there were 1.5 million human beings that were wiped out of the face of this earth. That's wrong. There were 6.5 million Jews that were wiped off. If you were to take the name Jew out, you would find that there were 6.5 million people, women, men, and children that were wiped off. It is wrong. And today, with all of the history, with everything that we've had and we've been reminded of, genocides are happening today. And when we say that we are approaching the 21st century, that genocides are not going to happen, that is wrong. And unless humanity, unless people like you, unless committed people like you will continually remind that genocide is wrong, that we're not going to be accepting and we're not going to lie down, whether it's against Armenians, Kurds, Jews, or anywhere, Sri Lankans around the world, that genocide is not acceptable, because it is not a reminder only to Armenians, it is a reminder to the thousands of students on this campus in the city of Glendale that genocides of 1915, not only did it happen then, it will continue to happen unless we stop tyrants and we stop nations taking their will and pushing their will against others. Thank you very much for inviting us, and we thank you.
To go on with this ceremony, and I would like to invite Dean Smith to share his point of views with us.
Speaking for Dr. Davitt and the college community, I'm very happy to work with the students to work very conscientiously to develop this day of memorial service. And we're looking forward to many tree plantings in the future. We hope that that the momentum established by the present group on campus will carry over for future generations, and we'll see more activities of this kind by our Armenian friends on campus. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for coming also, and I'd like to reiterate the point that Mr. Zion made about the universality of genocide. This plaque we have is not just for the Armenian genocide, but it emphasizes that it's dedicated to the memory of all other peoples who have suffered similar genocides against humanity, similar crimes against humanity.
Yes. If you know, Mr. Oshin Keshishan was in there too, over there. He hasn't changed too much. This plaque that you'll see outside very shortly was first installed in 1991. And if you recall what Larry Zarian said about how it's important to remember all genocides. This plaque, when we go out there, I will be reading it to say more about it. But one thing let me point out now is the location is different. This plaque moved 3 times. At first, it was next to San Rafael building. And the intent was to have the Armenian Student Association purchase several trees, Chinese pistachio trees specifically. And the purpose was to, every year, add another tree. The first year, we're going to plant 3 trees, and then every year, add another tree until the row is completed. Well, problems developed with the San Rafael building, so the plans had to change, the plaque had to move. And then the plaque was put in a second location, and then the college got remodeled again. And in the center of campus, there used to be the bookstore in the center of campus. It's completely different now, much more beautiful now, so the plaque had to move again. Eventually it came to this area, and now it was moved again shortly. So the history of this genocide plaque sort of parallels the history of the Armenian people. The Armenian people were deported. And maybe it's symbolic that this plaque has been deported several times. And let's hope now. Maybe it was meant to be. And each position was better than the other position. But that's and I want to thank Dr. Viar here. I was going to do it outside. But the landscaping now has been improved. It's beautiful. And I want to thank Dr. Viar for incorporating. The landscape had to be done anyway, but I want to thank him that he incorporated the plaque into the design of the landscaping. And when we go out there soon, you'll see it, and I'll read it and say more about what is written, the meaning of the plaque itself.
Okay, Hello, everybody. My name is Liza Hakobyan. I'm the president of the Armenian Student Association here on campus. And I just want to take a minute to thank some people. First of all, the Board of Trustees for passing the resolution to allow us to plan and do all the events we have been doing every Tuesdays and Thursdays for the past month. I would like to thank Dr. Viar for being very supportive, and I think he's been at all of the events that have been going on campus in the last month. And I want to thank our sponsors and dignitaries that were able to make it here today. Thank you. And of course, Professor Levon Marashian, who has also been the advisor of the Armenian Student Association since 1980. And now, in a minute, we're going to follow Mr. Albert Vartanian, who will lead us to the plaque playing the duduk. So, just give me 1 minute and we will lead him out right now. Okay.
Drop it down a little bit more.
Thank you all for gathering here. And I'm going to tell you more about the background to the plaque. And as I said earlier inside, this is the third place the plaque has been located. And I want to emphasize that the purpose of this plaque is not just for the Armenian genocide. Let me read to you what the text says. These trees are dedicated to the memory of 1.5 million victims of the Armenian genocide, committed by Ottoman Turkish governments, 1915-1923. And to the memory of Americans who helped generously to relieve the suffering, as well as to the memory of other people who also fell victim to crimes against humanity. April 24, 1991, GCC, Armenian Student Association. So I want to stress that there are three aspects to this plaque. One is remembering the Armenian genocide. The other refers to the presentation we had earlier about We Thank You, America. We heard already how many hundreds of thousands of Armenians were saved by Americans generously, who gave large amounts of money. Children gave nickels, dimes, collected in schools, to the point where across the U.S. there was a common phrase that mothers would say: if the child, let's say at the dinner table, is not eating his food, leaving food on the plate, all across America, mothers would say, finish that food. It's a shame to waste it. Remember the starving Armenians. And this phrase was common throughout the country. So this plaque emphasizes also that generous, life-saving activity of Americans. The third aspect of this plaque is calling attention to other genocides, to other crimes against humanity. We can't list all of them, obviously, but when we designed this plaque, we made sure that it talks about other genocides also, because there's genocide is universal. Unfortunately, it's a universal problem that plagues the earth. And remembrance, having a plaque, having a memorial, is a way of remembering. And remembrance is important because people who commit genocide want the genocide to be forgotten. Recently, we heard earlier inside about Pope Francis, who acknowledged the genocide just the other week. Why did he do that? Why did the European Parliament accept the genocide? Why did the German government, the Austrian government, just a few days ago. One reason is that other people, I, you, we, remember. If we didn't remember, if common people did not remember, the powerful people would not feel the pressure, would not feel the need to also remember. I get numerous Turkish TV stations at home. I monitor Turkish TV. And believe me, when the Pope acknowledged the genocide, inside Turkey, they went, very excited, very angry, saying some things to the point of being absurd. One of the top journalists in Turkey said, it must be that Armenians of the diaspora must have paid the Pope. He even gave a dollar amount. He said, I think Armenians gave the Pope $25 billion, not million. He said $25 billion. If only Armenians had that money, I don't know. You see, what happens is, maybe it's a guilt feeling that leads someone to say, to go to extremes like that, to make statements like that. So remembering, whether it's through congressional resolutions, which Congressman Schiff and others have introduced again, or remembering through a plaque, or remembering through demonstrations, or the events we had on campus this month, all these activities are extremely important. And there are many atrocities in the world, and in this case, it's important to remember this atrocity, especially precisely because it is being denied. That makes it more important to remember. This was called, for the first time, what happened to Armenians, as Mr. Periman noted inside, for the first time the phrase crime against humanity was used for the first time in human history, and used for the Armenian genocide, as we heard, May 1915. Unfortunately, there have been more crimes against humanity afterwards, and one of the reasons why there have been more is because this crime against humanity was never punished properly. So remembering has a huge difference, makes a huge difference. Inside Turkey, every year, on April 24, near April 24, Turkish media cover this issue extensively. By covering it, even though the coverage is slanted, just by covering it, what happens is inside Turkey, the average Turkish citizen who does not know anything about the genocide hears that there's something called a genocide. Ermeni soykırım, they say, Armenian genocide, so-called genocide. So when an average citizen who is not personally responsible for the genocide, not personally guilty, when he's heard that inside Turkey, nothing like this happened in school, in the media, when they hear that outside, governments, now a pope, is saying it's a genocide, what happens to them? They begin to think. They begin to think, how could the whole world say something like this, and it's only our government saying it's not a genocide? So smart people begin to think. And because of technology, because of the internet and Twitter and so forth, which the president of Turkey sometimes tries to block, Facebook and so forth, it's hard to keep it a secret anymore. So what happens is, events like this lead to a teaching experience, a teaching moment, a learning experience inside Turkey. Because if we don't remember, if we don't make efforts outside, inside Turkey there'd be silence. It would just be a point of history. But by doing activities like this, it makes it news inside Turkey, so it becomes a learning experience. And since this is a college, our job is to teach. One way to teach the Turkish people inside Turkey is to have events like this so that it becomes news for them. Their government gets kind of upset, and by getting upset, the government itself is teaching its people. One final word I want to say is the displays you see out here. It's a huge collection, and if you have time, please go there, read some of these. It's a huge collection of educational material, and even that is part of the effort to remember. Well, thank you all for coming. Thank you very much, and just look at the material outside, and we sent all the thanks inside. I really appreciate. Okay. One more thing.
Okay, one last thing, you guys. We have the Persian Club here, who would like to say a few words. So let's just give them a minute, please. Thank you.
Good evening. In the history of every nation, there are some moments that shape the future and instill a sense of sorrow, pride, and hope in humanity. The Armenian Genocide of 1915 is a premier example of this conflict. And as a behalf of the Persian Student Association, I would like to carry a message of sympathy and admiration for your pride and unity. Any tragedy of this extent may be forgiven, but never forgotten. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One final thing, I'll leave you with this. In January this year, there was a survey taken inside Turkey, a poll. And guess what? 9% of the respondents, these are Turks, Turkish citizens, 9% of the respondents said that they want their government to acknowledge the Armenian genocide. To us, 9% doesn't sound like much, but believe me, people from Turkey, that's a huge amount. A few years ago, it might have been 0. Today, 9%. Why is it 9%? That's significant, because Turkish historians have also begun to acknowledge the Armenian genocide, and that's because of the activity outside, partly. So progress is being made. Maybe next year it'll be 15%, eventually maybe 25%. So progress is being made. Thank you very much for all your attention.
Okay, now we have Viar who wants to say a few words too.
Thank you. I don't think I have much voice left, but I wanted to, on behalf of the Board of Trustees, to thank the entire campus for coming together this month, for helping us not only commemorate the Armenian genocide, but to spread the word, to educate not just the campus community, but the entire worldwide community of what happened 100 years ago. So on behalf of the Board of Trustees, thank you to the committee that organized all of the events, and thank you very much to everyone who participated. Please approach and put your flowers.
Thank you very much. One more thing. I couldn't pass, you'll know why it's important. The students, the Armenian Student Association, and other volunteers worked so hard to do all this. Last night, they were up, I don't know until how long, preparing all these flowers to arrange out there the number 100. I don't know how much sleep they got yesterday, maybe none. They were out here 5 a.m. in the morning preparing all this. So I want to give applause to the students who helped prepare all this.
Thank you very much, and please approach and put your flowers at the plaque, and thank you for taking part in our commemoration.